It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
Take Command podcast from Odyssey Sports. I'm Craig Hoffman. That is Logan Paulsen. Logan, here we go. Looking back at the tape. Did it get any better when you watched it in all 22 form than it felt on Sunday?
Yeah, I mean, when you watch the film as much as I've watched the game like twice now, and I take a lot of pretty fastidious with my notes, and I think if you kind of take away the first two drives of the game, which you can't do obviously, I liked some of the stuff that they did in the second half. I liked a lot of the stuff they did in the second half, and I think they're on the verge, if they continue to delve into that, they're on the verge of making, I don't want to say a quarterback-proof offense, but a quarterback-friendly offense, something that's very supportive of quarterback playing at a high level. So, what does that offense look like? I think, again, it's something that we've been talking about a lot, and you just see the advantages that it gives you. You see the advantage it gives you from a pass protection standpoint, from a quarterback standpoint, from a throwing lane standpoint. And when you have a quarterback like Heinicke, I think you need to lean into that more. And I still am a little bit flummoxed as to why they got away from it so dramatically in the first half of the game. And what I mean, I keep saying this, this idea that you are good at running counter, you're good at running inside zone, you're good at running duo, run those runs and then run the play action passes off of them, stack runs, create runs around that. I think, maybe a perfect iteration of this is in the first quarter, they run all these kind of zone read, GT, where they're pulling the guard and tackle, they're isolating the defensive end. And you can just tell that's not who they want to be on the zone read. They run a zone read a little bit later where they run it off of a duo action, right? They open to the side of the tight end. They bring the other Cole Turner back across the formation. He bluffs Thibodeau. Thibodeau thinks it's duo. He squeezes down, and Taylor has a 7-yard gain. That is the core, the foundational piece of who you are. Build around that. And so when you get to the second half and they're backed up, it's the first drive of the game, or first drive of the half, and they just come out off of duo play pass to Terry. Then it's another play pass, and it's a boot. They move the pocket. They do a whole bunch of different things off of that run action that you've worked so hard to establish, and they basically go down, never getting a third down, and they score a touchdown. And I just see that is the version of the offense. Then the next drive they come out, they hit that bomb to Jahan off of a duo play action pass. They hit a counter run to, it's not a counter. Was it a counter? I don't remember exactly what it was. Oh yeah, counter to Brian Robinson. You're inside the 20 on 2 plays. So all of a sudden, this offense that has been so tepid and so kind of labored, you see this element that they've earned, that they develop out of that. And I'm just that is where they need to be. And it's funny, if I look at the second half of this game, obviously there's a whole bunch of shortcomings we can talk about in a second. But that, to me, is what I was expecting from the entire game. And that, to me, if they can continue to build on that, gives you a chance against a team like San Francisco, which I think is good. It's a good sign. And does that mean they're going to win? No. But does it mean that you're developing this offensive identity around this core tenant? Yes. And I think they just need to lean into that a little bit more. And so I get a lot of confidence when I hear Ron say in the post-game presser, we are a run, play action pass team. A lot of people think that's a bad thing. San Francisco is that offense. That's what San Francisco does almost every single play. And they're considered one of the best offenses in the NFL. There is a lot of good things to glean from that. And I think that's what I took away from it offensively.
That's frustrating and interesting all at once. Because they, I don't know, it's interesting too, because the first quarter, right, it's the first two drives that you hate. They also ran 10 plays and then 9 plays. So they were able to convert drives, and do some things. They also didn't get anywhere. It's 10 plays for 41 yards is almost hard to do.
Right.
It's a lot of incompletions. It's a lot of short yardage stuff. You get, Samuel's stuffed in that for a loss of 3 at one point. The drive essentially ends when Heinicke gets sacked. And then you wind up punting from your own 34. Which that decision, I said this yesterday on the show, or Monday on the show. I can't really fault Ron because he's the one who watched Joey Sly warm up, but it just doesn't make sense to me that you're so screwed from 51 yards with Joey Sly.
I mean, the wind, apparently there was a 10-mile-an-hour wind. So kicking into a 10-mile-an-hour wind, there's going to be a difference in terms of the direction you're kicking, obviously. And I
Obviously,
don't
and they
know.
were kicking into it, and so,
Yeah,
as much as I wanna be like, "That's so dumb, how could he?" Like, he watched not only did he watch Sly warm up and go, "That's out of his range," and, Sly and the special teams, coach, Kawika, is like, it's out of his range, but Dable makes basically the same decision later in the game, facing
yeah,
the same direction from almost the same spot, so, as quiet as the wind was apparently on the field, it was very clearly swirling and affecting the ball, and as Ron said, like, it's actually like it's we're gonna pin them deep, and then we messed up the coverage. The ball hung up in the air, something weird happened. They missed a thing, and then next thing you know, you net like next to no yards because your execution's bad. And sometimes that's the NFL. I would argue that Ron's process was better than Dable's. Ron's
mm,
process of punting it there is better than Dable's of going for it on 4th and 9, except for Dable converted and Ron's team gave up a stupid punt return,
yeah,
and so you look bad. And sometimes that's the NFL. Sometimes
hmm
them's the breaks. But going back to kind of what you said about the offense and the choices, it's just frustrating that they would get away from that. And obviously some of that is on Turner to like, why are you trying so much? But it also is the kind of thing where like Ron's gotta, as the head coach, just like slap his hand away from the cookie jar. Like, no, like
mm,
we've accomplished our goals by not going into the cookie jar. Not that if you want cookies, you can absolutely and should enjoy cookies, especially during this very lovely holiday season. However, in this analogy, whatever goal you were trying to accomplish involved not eating the cookies, and Ron let Scott put his hand in the cookie jar, and it wasted a first quarter where they could have come out, been productive, and established some things, and maybe scored some points. And instead, they ran 19 plays in the first quarter to New York's 7 and only came out of it with a 3-0 lead.
yeah. And I just, again, and it's hard to say for sure that it would have gone the other way, but I think you see the result of kind of being who you are. I think you see the result of being who you are in the second half. And I think you saw how effectively the offensive line was blocking the counter play. That was a big play for them. Not so much the duo play action pass look was much better for them, but in terms of runs, the counter was excellent. And B Rob was just being a physical dog. And like the O line deserves a lot of credit because they were getting him, kind of into the teeth of the defense before he was getting contacted. And you see kind of that Derrick Henry esque ness in terms of, when you get a big man into the defense. You see the same thing with AJ Dillon up in Green Bay. Big man into the defense, untouched, like they can make a lot of plays. So I think that's another thing that's a little frustrating is like you got away from who you are. You got, like from a running game standpoint, like especially it just seems so counterintuitive because it was so effective. And
Right. They hadn't proved that they could stop it
right, right.
in 2
It
weeks.
Yeah, and I look at, I was watching Kansas City, for example, because we're getting ready to play San Francisco. And one of the things they did is they run the football and they ran right at San Francisco, but they understand like who they are and what they're good at. And they run like little just sweep variations. They're not running a lot of zone read or getting cute with guard tackle pulling. Like they are who they are from a run game standpoint. I think that clarity of vision is so important. And I think the other thing we need to talk about is the red zone, obviously. And there are some issues there that definitely need to be corrected. I think if you look at the past two games, the Giants and the Atlanta Falcons, I think there are opportunities to be excited. But again, some of the issues with the team show up there more acutely. You see Taylor's lack of arm strength. You see the lack of kind of elite playmaking at the quarterback position. You see the limitations of the offensive line. And so I think all of those things really come into full perspective. They kind of take all these warts that you're able to hide in the field, and then they're just on full display. Like you need to be better at quarterback. You need to be better at offensive line. So my challenge, if I'm Scott, I say, well, how do I manage that? And I quite frankly say like, well, maybe we become a little bit, I look at what New York does, for example, and they're very boot heavy in the red zone, partially because their offensive line's bad in pass protection, and they run the ball a lot in the red zone. So for
Yeah.
whatever reason, Scott gets in the red zone is like, let's get in these drop back passing situations. And that just doesn't feel like the right thing to me in those situations.
It's not. And it's so hard to drop back pass in the red zone anyway because there's just a limited amount of like a lot of passing concepts work because you also are scared of them throwing over your head. There is no
Hmm
such thing as the red zone. Go ahead, throw it to the fans. We don't care. The
hmm
windows become tighter. It's there's not a lot of space to operate. Things have to happen right now. And with a quarterback who doesn't throw with velocity to make things happen right now, and windows that are smaller, and a quarterback who also, for some reason, is clamming up a bit in the red zone. Doesn't
Mm,
make a lot of sense. Well, let's circle back in 5 minutes or
sure.
so to the red zone and, like, let's really flesh that out. If I'm
Mm,
making a checklist for between the 20s, right? And really, I'm gonna say goal line to 20, goal line to red zone,
yeah.
because, this first thing on my checklist would have prevented the strip sack. I am avoiding, like, rule thing number 1 I'm trying to do for the Commanders' offense is avoid drop back pass at all costs.
Yeah.
There's just gotta be a better option at almost all times. We're in a dire passing situation. Okay, I'm gonna boot a little bit and move the pocket. Or
Mhm,
I'm just gonna straight up roll out. You know, you don't even have to boot.
mhm,
I'm just gonna roll out, I'm gonna move the pocket. I'm gonna be unpredictable of where my quarterback is gonna go back and stand, because it's if I'm vulnerable for something like a strip sack, fumble recovery for a touchdown, because I'm at my own 10-yard line. But I'm trying to limit the drop backs in the game to 10 or less,
mhm,
maybe even 5 or less. That would be thing 1 for me. Thing 2, I'm gonna run the runs that I'm good at. I'm not
mhm,
trying to get fancy, and it's not just trying to, like, be simple or make a point. Like, they're really good at those runs. In
mhm.
the first game against the Giants, I just pulled up the box score for the tie game. Brian Robinson ran 21 carries for 96 yards. He averaged 4.6 a carry. Gibson, 4.3 a carry. Samuel was 7.7 a carry. His were a little bit skewed, though, because he had one big, long 21-yarder.
Yeah.
But if
Mhm.
you give Samuel, like, the stuff that he's good at, eventually he tends to bust one. He tends to get
Right.
a big one. And so I'm going to run the runs I'm good at. And then thing 3 on my 3-item checklist is I'm getting my best players the ball, and my best player is Terry McLaurin.
Right.
And, we've had some fun with that earlier in the year, but I think the results have been there. Like, when they got Terry more involved in the offense, they scored more points and won more games. And the drive that they have, that touchdown to start the second half, is run through 17. They just decided, bleep it, we're getting him the ball. And I was actually watching Hard Knocks last night, and not that the Cardinals are like a model offense in the NFL, but it was interesting hearing, like, Cliff Kingsbury on the headset at one point talking to his coaches, and he's like, "Hey guys, we need to get the ball to Hop here." And it's like they weren't thinking about route concepts and what the defense is doing. It's like, bleep it, how do we get the ball to DeAndre Hopkins? Because that's going to make our offense go. And Chris Collinsworth said it on the broadcast Sunday night. Sometimes it's not about the plays you call, it's about the players you call it for. And once they started getting Terry involved, the ball moved more and they score. Jahan is obviously awesome in the red zone. And, like, that that is like the 3-step. If we're not doing this, we're failing as an offense checklist is staying out of drop back pass because we can't protect it. Run the runs that we're good at because it's going to get us yards and we're really good at it, and get the ball to our best players, with the heaviest dosage being to our absolute best player, and that player is Terry McLaurin, outside of obviously Robinson and Gibson in the running game. But, like, when we're throwing to McLaurin, and that includes screens, it includes short stuff, it includes taking shots to him deep, because good things happen when he gets thrown the football. That's my offensive checklist. And they failed on that in the first half on Sunday, on
Yeah.
basically all 3 accounts.
Yeah. I mean, I don't disagree. We talked about it before. I do think that there was like a little bit of like overthinking it by Scott, and I think that shows up. And obviously, like every play is designed to go for a touchdown, so it's easy for me to sit here on Monday and be like, oh, they should have done X, Y, Z. But I just think the proof is in the pudding. I think look at the first game, and I think the thing about the first game is like you felt like if they just execute a little bit better in certain situations, they win by 10. And then
Mhm.
so I'm not trying to deviate too much from that game plan. And I think, like you got the runs you're good at, obviously, right? I think that's like I think a nice point you established there. But you can add like little wrinkles off of it, like the jet sweep
Sure.
stuff they've done, all that kind of stuff. And so lean
But
into that
I'm
stuff.
accounting for that in the game, because you're
Yeah,
always gonna have game plan runs. Like, I'm not saying
right,
don't game plan and run day 1 installs for the entire thing, but, like, you're those game plan specific things. This is something I learned from you, so I wanna make sure that the audience who listens or watches this understands that I am not preaching this at Logan. I'm trying to share things that I've learned that I think make for good process. Is like, those play off of those base runs. Like,
right.
I'm counting a jet sweep off of duo action as a run they are good at, right?
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm
Right.
saying. You have your variations off of your runs that are your wrinkles. Run that stuff. Run that stuff that you've kind of majored in that again you think works against the Giants. Yeah, man, I just it was a little frustrating. The first half was a little frustrating to me because it was a little confounding. I was like, why did they what motivated them to do this from a defensive standpoint? And I don't really have a good solution. Like to me the proof is in the first game. You got after him, and I understand that you didn't score all these points, but I look at certain situations like again in the first game, maybe you're a little bit too conservative, right? But to me, to get out of the conservatism, you run play action pass, you run a boot, like you don't do drop back passing. I think that's like where I'm at with them.
Right.
It's like you know who you are. Why was there such a stark transition away from these elements? And I don't really have a good reason. And I think you saw like how productive the offense, I said this already, could be in the second half. And I come out of this thinking like, wow, like maybe they've found a little bit of a formula here that will work against better teams. Who knows?
Who knows? My fear is that that's what they think too. And they just think that they're so close. And if they could just do XYZ a little bit better. And then sometimes you need to take a step back and be like, well, the reason we can't do XYZ is better is because we're not good enough, because
Right.
this is actually who we are. And like that gets dangerous when you talk about evaluation in the offseason and evaluation of your coaches, evaluation of your players, et cetera. But for right now, like if you're looking for a game plan moving forward, that's correct. The other thing that just popped in my mind, sage advice from one of your favorite wink wink former teammates, JJ Watt, because he's on the Cardinals and thus he was in this Hard Knocks
Right.
episode, and he was talking to Cam Thomas, their rookie edge rusher, and he was basically like, you need to not be afraid of what you're good at, which is actually really really good advice. And he's like,
Yeah.
you have a really good in Cam Thomas's case, this rookie for Arizona. He's like, you have a really good long arm. And
Yeah.
just because you study the O lineman that you're going to face that week and you see that this tackle is really good against long arm doesn't mean you shouldn't use it because you're good at it. Go
Right.
be good at it. And
Right.
that's a little bit of what I feel like happened this week to Washington and what Scott was looking at. And he looked at the Philly tape and, saw what the Giants were bad at and was like, we're gonna try to do that even though we're not that good at it.
Right.
Or we
I think
don't have the
that's
reps
yeah.
at it. And it's it's not I do wanna give Scott this credit, and this is also somehow relative to this, this episode of Hard Knocks last night, but it was the week that they were preparing for New England, and
Mhm.
basically their entire message was like, "They're gonna attack what we're bad at."
Mhm.
Like, that's New England's thing for years. Belichick has always had kind of an ability to change his team, not really have for as much as we preach identity, 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 he is anti-identity. He's like,
Mhm.
"We're gonna shapeshift each week and just murder you
Mhm.
with what you're bad at." And he's able to do that because he's him and his level of attention to detail, the players he brings in. And by the way, it doesn't work as well when you don't have Tom Brady.
Right.
So the difference between like trying it in New England based, we're gonna attack the weaknesses at all times, and what that means is that is their identity. That is their entire ethos. And so trying to do that versus establishing a set identity, saying we're good at this thing and we're just going to do it till you can't stop it, which I think has been over the history of the league probably more successful.
Mhm.
And it's probably an easier way to build a franchise. Um, when that is your approach, you can't skew from that. And that's kind of what we're saying is like they tried the New England thing in a way last week, even if that's not how they would necessarily describe it. They tried we're just going to attack where they're bad at,
Mhm.
and it didn't. The Venn diagram of what they were good at, those two circles didn't really overlap.
Yeah, I agree. And it's I've been a part of teams that have done that. They've said, "Oh, look what this team did. Let's put that in. Let's get that done." And it just doesn't always pan out. And I do think there is a lot of truth and a lot of merit to like what you're describing. Just be who you are. And again, I think that's the thing that's really hard to like articulate, or it's hard to articulate for me, is like be who you are and innovate in that space. Innovate in the space of who you are and who you want to be and what you've been successful with. And I think Scott's done a nice job of that. Like when you watch some of the details that he's added in the run game, some of the details he's added from a jet sweep, some of the play action stuff he's added, I like that. Keep doing that. Like keep building that package out, building that stuff out. I like that they did a boot in there the other day where Taylor's able to run for a first
Love it.
down. I like the boot that they ran to Jahan where it's like an easy 10-yard gain for his first catch. Like that stuff is something they haven't been doing a ton of. Like bring that in. That's excellent. Do more of that because that fits your skill set. It fits your roster construction. And I think that's the other thing that's really hard. I help out at a high school, and there's always this tendency to be like, oh, we should do X because this team killed this other team at it. And you always got to be like, they killed them because that is who they are and that's what they do. They know that stuff. And when we put it in, we're not going to be that same thing, right? So we've kind of circled this point a whole bunch, but I do think
Yeah.
it's a big point, and I really think it's one of the reasons the offense struggled. And I think if you're a fan, there are reasons there coming out of that second half. There are reasons to be optimistic. I look at that and I say that we saw elements of an explosive offense here, and I think there are decisions that Scott made that were poor, like just from a game plan, game flow, like not. Kevin Sheehan said this to me when I did his podcast, just not feeling the game, not feeling the
Yes.
flow of the game. And I think that is a perfect articulation of it. So in addition to kind of putting in a whole bunch of stuff that maybe you didn't need to put in, there's also just kind of a lack of that feel. And when you talk to play callers, that's a legit thing, man. When you're not feeling the game, when you can't get in a rhythm, like that's a thing, you know. And so I think Scott's allowed to have an off day from a play calling standpoint. And I think what's crazy is despite all of these deficiencies, they still had 380 yards of offense, and they still look dynamic.
Right.
You still get Jahan touches, you still get Terry touches. B Rob looks excellent, right? And I just look at that and I say that's good. That gets me excited. That says going into San Francisco, if you add more boots, if you develop your play action pass, if you still cultivate those wrinkles in the run game, there's a shot there. There's a shot because all of a sudden you're not a 3 yards in a cloud of dust offense. You're a dynamic offense. And I think that's something that is exciting potentially, obviously.
Right. It is. You still get 387, but you only score 12 points. And like this is the yin and the yang of what they've been
Yeah.
all year is like, oh, the process, the process, the process. If you were to like somehow hit shuffle on all the plays and watch them out of order, and you'd be like, oh, that was pretty good. That was good. That was good. So how many points they score?
Right.
12? Like that's kind of been the year for them.
And to that point, like I've been a part of early in Shanahan's career, Kyle's career, like we were on offenses where we'd put up a ton of points, put up, or not a ton of yards, and we wouldn't put up a lot of points. And I do think that is an offense developing your identity. Because I think in addition to kind of cultivating these packages in the field in between the 20s, like we've been talking about, there's also a need to cultivate that identity in the red zone. And when they get to the red zone, they get away from their kind of normal runs, they get away from their normal passes. And again, defenses are changing there, but it's also kind of like, screw that, man. Let's just be us. Let's run duo. Who cares if it's for 2 yards? Let's run the play action pass. Let's run a boot. Let's get ourselves in better situations to be successful here. And I like what Scott has schemed up from a drop back passing standpoint, but I really like the play action pass stuff he's done there. Think about the touchdown to Bates. Think about the overthrow to Logan Thomas. That is what this team is. And you look at the Atlanta game, and there's an excellent Tampa 2 beater on 3rd and 10, and you're like, wow, this is a brilliant design, but they can't protect it. So that's why it doesn't work out, right? That those are the little shortcomings, and you have to understand that as a play caller, that that's not who this team is. And that can be really challenging because you're like, look at how smart I am. Look at what I just designed. And Scott, to his credit, that's an awesome play design by him, that cover 2 beater. That was fantastic. But is it the right solution for this team? I don't know.
You're listening to the Take Command podcast from Odyssey Sports, or watching it at youtube.com/@Odyssey Sports. Let's just keep rolling on that. Because, like, what are they doing and what are the shortcomings in the red zone? Because it seems like so much of it is personnel based, like you were just saying, as opposed to like, oh, they're trying a bunch of stuff that's silly and will never work. It's like, no, no, no.
Right.
They're
It
trying a
does
bunch of
work,
stuff
yeah.
that their guys can't execute.
Yeah, and I kudos to the Giants. They had a nice game plan this week. They matched up a lot of concepts really well in the red zone. But also, again, it kind of goes back to the game flow thing. I felt like Scott didn't always feel the red zone the same way he was feeling the stuff in the field, and that's tough. But I do think outside of probably the last 4 games, he's done a good job in the red zone of scheming stuff open. And I think, think back to the Atlanta game where he misses John Bates on the seam, right? He hits John Bates, it's a catch, but John Bates is out of bounds because he waits too long. And I think about the way he's cultivating offense in the red zone is really interesting because he's doing a good job of creating spaces and attacking the weak parts of coverages. So like in cover 3, right, when you get those 3 guys across the back, the weak spot in the coverages are the seams, right? And he does a good job of identifying the coverage, dictating coverages in a lot of senses, and then getting the ball there. And what I see is when you see it on film, like you have to know as the quarterback that that's the weak spot. And I have to anticipate the throw to that area as opposed to the man. So when the man's in the window, you're too late. You got to
Right.
throw it to the window that's been created by the concept. And that can be very, very challenging. And you can tell Taylor, for whatever reason, is not feeling overly confident in doing that. And then also there's like been some pass protection stuff that have also flummoxed Taylor in
Yeah,
those
I feel like
situations
there
as
was
well.
one of the replays I watched during the game where I was like, "Oh, Logan's wide open.
Yeah.
Son of a gun." And he doesn't have time to get there. I also wonder, Ron touched on this post game when he was asked about some of the red zone stuff, and he's like, it's just a different speed in the game. Like I don't know that it's a they don't practice hard enough type of thing. And I'm trying to figure out a different way to say that is more accurate and reasonable. But like you just can't, I guess I'll put it this way. You can't repeat the process of game speed in practice. It's just there's not the adrenaline flow. It's too late in the year. That's just not the speed that's optimal to work at. But when you're talking about some of the anticipation stuff, that affects the timing. And so if it's like snap now in game, but it's like snap now in practice, that half second is the window closing in the game. And I just wonder if like Taylor's lack of, experience over the course of years and the lack of reps and all of that plays into this on some level, but still like, buddy, you've now started over 25 NFL games. Like you gotta get there. Like you just gotta let it rip. You gotta trust what your read is. You have a pre-snap read for a reason. You watch the play, unfold and you check that hypothesis, if you will, that you had pre-snap and if it's right, then you just gotta let it rip and trust that your guy's gonna win because that's how you score in this league.
Yeah, and I think that's it. I really do. It's not necessarily like a practice thing because you practice the red zone, but there's something. It's different. It's a little bit different. You can't see the throws the same way. The protection's a little bit different. The defense understands, like you see all these sacks in the red zone, and part of the reason is the throwing windows are smaller, and the defensive line has a little bit more time to get there. Right. Understanding that from a play calling standpoint, understanding that as a quarterback, understanding that as an offensive line, those are all things that are very, very challenging to do. And the defensive approach changes, quite frankly. And so, how well prepped are you? I'm sure they're very well prepped. I'm sure they talk about this all the time. But yeah, those are the things that make it tough. And I will say, like in terms of offensive development, offenses I've been on that have been very productive in the field have taken a long time to get productive in the red zone for whatever reason. And I think a little bit of it is you don't have the same opportunity to rep those plays. It's like you rep the first and second down stuff a ton. You rep third down a ton, and because they're kind of the same plays, but then all of a sudden red zone's a little bit different schematically, a little bit different emphasis, and how much time do you have to emphasize that? So I think that's all part of it, and that's one of the reasons
When
why
you say
like
rep it though, are you talking practice or just like because it doesn't come up as often in games?
yeah, so in practice, your practice structure is like you have first, second down on Wednesday, right? And then you'll probably add in maybe like a little bit of blitz period on for third down, just kind of touch on it, right? Thursday, you'll probably do again, you do first, second down, and then you do maybe red zone, maybe a little bit of third down, something like that, probably third down. And then Friday is kind of your red zone day. And a lot of teams that I was on near the end of my career had switched red zone to earlier in the week so you could be with that material longer, right?
Mm,
As opposed to the last day of the week in your walkthrough practice, you're just touching on red zone then. And I don't say touch because they are doing red zone stuff kind of, at full speed and it's an emphasis for the day, but get them that information on Thursday as opposed to Friday. And kind of touch third down and your first and second down in both periods on Wednesday and Thursday. So again, that's a practice structure thing. That's an emphasis thing. And it could be that I don't know. I watch practice, but I don't know the practice structure or the emphasis all the time. And then I do think there's just like you need to, if you want to be good at it, you need to put more time into it. But that again, that detracts from other elements of the offense.
I do wonder if at this time of year, especially if they feel comfortable with all the stuff that we've talked about, the duo stuff, the play action off of it, and a lot of what they're doing, and feel like they can go out there and run it. If they spend more time on the red zone stuff this week,
Yeah,
I could see Ron making that kind of change. Um, it almost feels like you have to. You got it because you got to figure that area of the field out.
yeah.
And I
And I
thought
think
one of
it's
the more
frustrating. I think that's
telling.
the frustrating thing about it, though. Sorry to cut you off, Craig. Is just like they've had opportunities, they've had open throws, and I think if you're Ron, if you're Scott, you say, "Look at these open opportunities. Look what we've developed," and it's one person missing the block. It's the quarterback holding the football. So to me, it's like not that far. It's not that that outlandish to be like, "Oh my gosh!" Like they're terrible. It's like it's not like every concept's blanketed. It's just like the
Right.
timing or whatever, like those little details are just it's not quite there. So I think that's why it's probably extra frustrating for Scott and Ron and Taylor.
Well, that was what I was gonna say is, like, Ron was, like, I don't wanna say oddly frustrated, but extra frustrated,
Mhm,
in his post-game press conference on Sunday, because he said, like, "We worked on the re" it was almost like he was miffed by it, like, he didn't
mhm,
understand. He's like, "We worked on red zone stuff.
mhm,
Why did this not change? We spent time on this. How
mm,
could it not have evolved and changed, and why were we not better there?" And felt like a lot of that frustration was directed at Taylor, some of it at Scott as well, 'cause I think that some of it they look at and they're like, "Man, if he would throw the ball now." And I'm curious what, what Ron will say as he's gotten a chance to look at the
yeah.
tape and if he's pressed on it a little bit more as the week goes. And maybe some of the stuff, he circles back and is like, "You know what? Like, Scott drew up a good concept, but I don't think that's the best for our personnel right now, and maybe we need to change some of the calls down there." Maybe he
Well,
changes his tune a little bit,
I
but
was just thinking about it. How
yeah.
often were they in the red zone?
They were in the red zone. I mean, they had the 2 turnovers, which were obviously huge.
In the red, not in the red
They
zone though,
Yeah. Well, I mean, they have the fumble and then turnover on downs on the last one, so technically
too.
that's 2. The field goal drive ended outside the red zone. They got in the red zone technically on the touchdown to Jahan. That's
Mhm,
from the 19, so high red.
uh-huh.
Um, and I think that's it.
That's it, right? So, I look at that and I say, on the fumble, the play before the fumble, Jahan's open on a post, but the snap's high. Remember that?
Oh, yeah, and he throws it and it's nearly
He
picked.
throws it, it's almost intercepted. So to me, that's a good concept that is undone, right? And then the second one is blanketed, and Taylor should probably run for first down. But and then we talked about on the last opportunity, they score a touchdown that's taken off the board. So that's how close they are, right? That's
Right.
it's not like they're miles and miles away. It's like they're a bad snap from a touchdown. They're a illegal formation away from a touchdown, probably another play in that sequence, right? That you could look at. I have to remember, I have to check my notes, but so they're almost 3 for 3 in the red zone on the day. So to say that they're
Yeah.
disastrous in the red zone and they're like literally a play away in both of those drives, I think is a little bit unfair. And I think when you look at it from that perspective, you look at it play by play in the red zone. There was the one that they kick a field goal on, where they hit the 3rd and 3. I think there are some play calling deficiencies, right? There's a 3rd and 3. Um, where Curtis gets a touch in a short yardage situation. Like that's kind of a silly play call, I thought, in my opinion. And again,
That's in the one in their own end you're talking about where they're at, like, their own 32?
no, there was another one. Let me double check my notes. But yeah, like so there was another one where he gets like a jet sweep action on
Oh,
it might have
yeah.
been like a 2nd and 2 or a 3rd and 2, something like that. And that's again a bad play call again from getting you another set of downs and giving you another opportunity. And it's easy to say it's a bad play call today, but I also say it's a bad play call because Brian Robinson's running his face off. So like get him in a situation where he can
You're
execute
talking
for
about the
you.
one where it's 1st and 10 at the 11. Robinson comes off a 19-yard carry.
Yes.
Curtis gets a first down carry off left end for 1 yard. Thibodeau
Yeah.
makes the tackle.
Right.
They miss, or they get a quick completion to Terry for 5 yards and then the sack fumble. So it's 2 plays before the sack
Yes,
fumble.
right, and I kinda think
Yeah,
to
yeah.
myself, like, "What like, why are we getting so cute there?" You know?
Mhm.
And, I like the play call to Terry, but again, that's a sequence where, maybe Scott could be a little bit more efficient. We mentioned the post that Taylor almost threw an interception on, right? We mentioned the procedure penalty, right? So when people say the red zone's terrible, like it's offensive mistakes that aren't allowing you to be successful. It's not necessarily scheme, it's not necessarily personnel. It's like they are not as efficient in the red zone. Like I look at the Atlanta game, we've talked about it a lot because I did a breakdown of that red zone period. They get a pressure on a wide open post, right? They're late on a throw, right? In the Giants game in the first game, you overthrow Logan Thomas, right? You miss Jahan in the back of the end zone. Both of those would have been touchdowns. You get an offensive PI that's not called in the first Giants game, right? The one to Terry that everyone was kind of flummoxed about, right? You get Taylor holding on the ball too long on a zero pressure on an out route that is open to Terry McLaurin, right? So that's those are all good plays. Those are all opportunities to score.
Well, this is kind of the question though, is like good plays on paper aren't necessarily good plays. I don't say in practice. Good plays once you get on the field. Good plays in
Sure.
games, right? Once you get past the theory, because you have to have a quarterback who can execute the throws with consistency. You have to have an offensive line that can actually protect to execute these things. So, like, all plays are designed to work if everybody does their job. Like, how realistic is it to and this is ultimately the question. I don't know the answer I'm asking you. Like, how realistic are the play calls being called to be executed at a high level given the personnel that they have? And if the answer is they should be executed and like Taylor should make that throw and like it's not Taylor should make that throw, like Taylor at his current level can make that throw with regularity and he just didn't on this particular one, then fine. You run it again. Like
Yeah.
literally run it back. If the answer is he misses that throw all the time, and by the way,
Right.
this route concept takes 4 seconds to develop,
Sure.
so they better not call it because this O-line can't block, then those are bad play calls, even if they would work with different personnel.
Correct. Yeah, that's a really good point. And I do so I try to hit it with that objective lens when I look at it. And I say a lot of these, maybe one in the Atlanta game is a little bit long developing, but I think on the whole, they're plays that can and probably should be executed.
Yeah.
And again, like it's people, everyone's holding the bag here. And what I mean by that is everyone's making a mistake at a different moment, right? So one play it's the offensive line, one play it's the quarterback, one play it's the receiver, right? One play it's the play caller. And I think that is the sign of a bad red zone team. And when I remember when I was on those Kyle Shanahan teams, it was very much like that. It's just like you get down there and for whatever reason, everyone kind of takes their turn making a mistake. And because I mean, Wes Schweitzer had an excellent game blocking Dexter Lawrence. Excellent. Like he deserves all the kudos. But you have a high snap in like the most critical moment of the game.
Right.
And we can't get the ball to Jahan for a touchdown. Right?
Right.
Terry McLaurin, like one of the most consistent players in the history of this organization, lines up a little bit too deep off the ball, and it's a legal procedure on a touchdown. Right? Like who would have
Right.
thought? Like if you had the over under on Terry McLaurin making a penalty in this game, like it's
Right.
basically zero.
And,
So
especially like even how often is that called by a referee in that situation? Because Terry does do the due diligence of checking and,
mhm,
there's just miscommunication, right? Like the odds of that happening are so slim, which is why it's so infuriating that it does.
that did happen. Yeah. So I think that's what I ultimately turn to is I think this is a developing offense. It's a growing offense. I think there's opportunities in the red zone that as a fan and as an analyst and as a fan of football, I feel good about. It's just about capitalizing on those opportunities. And that is very, very challenging to do. So I think they're closer than people think, but sometimes that closeness in terms of execution takes literally a year. It's 2011 Washington Redskins to 2012, and we were a totally different team, right? And that it just took a while for us to get more familiar with those red zone concepts. And I know that's not what fans want to hear, but I think I'm pleasantly surprised that Scott's process is solid. It's not outstanding by any stretch. It's solid. The opportunities are there. Now it's just about taking those opportunities and saying, hey, let's finish this. Let's finish these drives. And you can almost tell that people are like hyper aware of red zone inefficiency because the players seem to get a little bit tight. Taylor gets a little bit tight, and I think that's also a part of it.
Take Command podcast from Odyssey Sports here on, well, wherever you're listening right now. Unless you're watching, then it's wherever you're watching right now. Full episodes available, youtube.com/@Odyssey Sports. Of course, the full audio episodes available as well. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the free Odyssey app, wherever else you can listen to your podcast. All right, Logan, real quick, defense. Upon further review, I'm
Mm,
guessing not much would change based off your initial, television watch of the game. I mean, they ultimately gave up 12 or 13 points. Like they played well, very obviously. They also played very poorly on one drive where they gave up 102 yards of total offense on a 97-yard drive that included a penalty that set the Giants back. Penalty yardage they regained, thus the 102 total yards of offense on a single drive. And they also very ill-timely could not stop Saquon Barkley on 3 or 4 consecutive big runs in the fourth quarter when they were trying to get the ball back with a little bit more time. Ultimately, the offense still had a shot, and we
yeah.
just talked a lot about how that didn't go great. But the defense, down in, down out, like seemed to be pretty good.
Yeah, and I would agree. I think there's a couple thoughts about the defense. One is I was surprised at how, I guess, conservative is the word I'm going to use. They played a lot, not a lot, but more than normal zone, more than normal kind of two shell stuff. And I think that that kind of put them at a disadvantage when they're stopping the run. And on that drive you were describing where Saquon comes out running the football, they were in two shell for the first three plays, big runs on three plays in a row. Then they were like, okay, enough of that. Let's get in our Cinco package. Let's get in cover three. And then the drive ends. But why didn't you make that decision, after the first big run or after the second big run? It took three runs to get there. But
Right.
kudos to Jack for making the change and getting the ball back to your offense with like a minute 45 left in the game. So I know that's kind of frustrating, but he did make the correction. And I think on that long drive, like I was quite frankly blown away by what Daniel Jones was doing. Like he looked like an elite passer. Like I'm just trying to think back to the sequence. So, it's third and 8, 3rd and 9
There's
on the
the
first.
first third down on the drive is 3rd and 9
Yeah,
on their own 31.
and Jack throws in a mix-up, which I like. No, he brings a pressure. The nickel's a little bit late coming off the edge. Daniel Jones stands in there like a absolute G. He looks so basically they ran like what I call like attack. So they're in a 3-by-1. The number 3 runs over the ball. The number 2 runs straight, and the outside guy runs a comeback, right? And Daniel Jones stares down the guy over the ball. Bobby McCain, who's the hook player, drifts to match that, which is what you're supposed to do. And Daniel Jones, with a DB unblocked in his face, delivers a strike to, I think it was to James on that play, right? And again, using his eyes to manipulate the defense. I think the next third down is, what's the next third down in that drive, Craig?
The next third down in that drive was another 3rd and 9, I
Third
believe.
and
I'm
nine.
looking at the right one again.
And so,
Yeah, they got into 2nd and 15. Breida catches a check down for 6, and then they're 3rd and 9 again at the Washington 35. That leads to the 4th and 9, which
yeah,
maybe is the play you're thinking about.
yeah, the 4th and 9 is Jack again trying to mix it up, plays a little bit of man. You get James on Bobby McCain. James runs a good route, and and Daniel Jones just threads the needle. Like he was on it. Then there's the next play, which is like a first and whatever, first and
First and 10.
first and
They're at the
10.
24 still, so they're
Yeah.
not quite in 1st and goal. But that's when they get the 19-yarder to Hodgins.
And so that play, Jack comes out in cover two, Tampa two. Bostic opens to the 3-by-1 side. There's a 2-by-2 kind of, there's the corner who's got the flat. Bobby McCain's got the hook. And Daniel Jones, this MFer, stares down the flat and basically throws a no look pass to Hodgins right behind it. Like throws a no look pass. So for 3 consecutive third downs, this dude was, and a first down, this dude was straight dealing. And I think like that's something like when you say like they were making plays and we weren't, like that dude Daniel Jones was elevating everything and really understood like Jack was, it was a nice chess match. He's bringing pressure. The pressure's a little late, gets caught up with the tight end, which is a little bit frustrating because it would have hit him right in the teeth. Throws off the timing. Daniel Jones makes an excellent throw under pressure. The 4th down, excellent throw under pressure. The first in that 18-yard gain, I mean, it was literally a no look pass, man. Like it looked like Patrick Mahomes. So when I see that production from him, like if you look at the rest of the drive, Saquon Barkley breaks Bostic's ankle on a play for a first down. But outside of that, it's Daniel Jones making assessments of the defense. And Jack did a good job of throwing some different stuff at him. And Daniel Jones just was ready and made play after play after play. And so that to me is, again, like that's just good football by him. And as much as Jack is like, and this is the other thing I need to say before we continue, sorry, Craig,
Mhm.
is they really understood their limitations, the Giants. They called a ton of like 3-step drops from the gun, which plays
Yeah.
essentially like Quip Game to get deeper concepts. And so everyone's like, where's the rush? Where's the rush? They knew what they needed to do. They didn't take a lot of deep shots. They basically dinked and dunked their way down the field. And I think if you're Jack, you're probably okay with that because the only way they beat you is if they hit a deep ball to Slayton. And they just basically say, you're not going to do that. And we don't think Daniel Jones can consistently deal. And Daniel Jones on that drive was dealing.
Yeah, and the only way they beat you is if they get a fumble, scoop, and score, and your offense is completely inept in its entirety. In terms of quarterback hits, let's see, is it in this area of the box score? I know like James Smith Williams had 2. Let me see if I can pull up the
Montez
just gonna
had
I'm gonna have to
one,
do quick
maybe.
math. I'm gonna have to do quick math in the individual box score real quick, but, let's see. Quarterback hits. Sweat had 2, Smith Williams had they just had 4, but so
Yeah.
each of your edge players gets 2, and that's in 32 dropbacks. So, like, not ideal. You'd like to hit him more.
There's a
But like
couple
you
extra
said,
pressures there
the
too.
balls yeah, there's extra pressures and, like, the balls coming out so fast. I mean, that's the thing, like, he's 21 of 32 for 160 yards. He threw quickly and the ball went nowhere, but
Yeah.
it was enough. And that 18 play drive, you talk about how it's all Jones. Here's the 18 plays. I will do this as quickly as possible. Saquon left. Daniel Jones short pass. Daniel Jones short pass. Daniel Jones short pass. Barkley left. Daniel Jones short pass. Short pass again. Breida up the middle. Another short pass. Another short pass. Barkley left. Daniel Jones, incomplete. Penalty, no play. Jones, short middle. Jones, incomplete. Jones, 4th and 9, short middle. Jones, short middle again to Hodgins. Daniel Jones runs left. Saquon Barkley runs left. That's the 18
Touchdown.
plays.
He
Like
was dealing.
Jones short, Barkley. Jones short, Breland. Jones short, like that's it. That's the drive.
Yeah. And so again, like one of the things we talked about in the preview show was how you got to contain him and find out what their wrinkle was. And I don't think we had a good answer for that quick game stuff. I mean, you're in the right, and again, it's him manipulating you. It's him doing next level stuff in a very short time window. So as much as people want to,
Yeah,
poo poo him and what he's been doing, like he did a great job in this game. And
he Alex Smithed it. He goes,
yes,
"We can't go broke making a profit."
right. And getting your ball to playmakers and letting those guys, like even the boot on the second completion you're describing there, right? Casey Toohill is inches from him, and he just lofts the ball over right to the tight end. The tight end runs for 8 yards. He just did that down in and down out on that drive, and so Jack, again, he didn't call like a bad series there. It wasn't like they were getting big chunk plays. Guys weren't like terribly out of position. It's just Daniel Jones was just a little bit better than what you had. And so again, like when I say props to Daniel Jones, like props to Daniel Jones.
Is there a plausible explanation for why he's so good consistently against this team? Because someone asked me that I was on one of the podcasts, the other podcasts in the podcast sphere of Commanders podcast last week, and
Uh-huh.
someone goes, "Why is he so good?" And I was like, "I don't know. Maybe there'll be a brain study 100 years from now that uh, discovers some kind of elevated performance when you see certain colors, and they'll go back and dig up Daniel Jones, and or his brain will be frozen for science, and they'll discover that gene that when he sees burgundy, his performance elevates." That's as
I
good
think
of an explanation I got as
I
anything.
think that's
'Cause
pretty dialed in.
he turns into Mahomes meets Joe Montana
It
meets
is weird. Like
whoever against these guys, and I don't it's different coordinators, it's different coaches, it's different players, it's different locations, it's home, it's away. He just does.
yeah, and I would say if I had to kind of put something on it, I think Kafka and Dayball did a good job of putting him in a good spot and putting the O line in a good spot. But I also think like
But that doesn't explain
objectively,
what happened when he was being coached by Joe Judge and sucked
I
in every
know.
other game and was good against these goobers.
Well, this year those guys deserve a lot of credit. They've done
For
a good
sure.
job, right? And I've never seen him play like this consistently like this. Like when you watch him on film, like he's their offense. So this year, I think he's kind of turning a corner a little bit, and it'll be really interesting to see what they do because if they let him walk because they didn't get his fifth-year option, he's a guy that I think Washington should take a really hard look at. If he's playing like that, if he's got the arm talent, if he can run that way, like he's like Taylor Heinicke on steroids kind of thing. So
Yeah. I guess
um,
the thing that's scary is, like, if I'm Daniel Jones, I wanna stay. Like,
yeah,
yeah, because I'm like, these guys are getting more out of me than anybody else has. Like, I wanna continue to develop in
yes,
this. But if
yeah,
I'm them, I might be like, if I can do this with Daniel Jones, imagine what I can do with a guy who's really got it. But like physical talent wise, Jones has got everything. So it's just a
yeah.
matter of like what happens if you give him weapons? Does 160 yards become 280 just because guys are getting more open and running after the catch and, all those kinds of things on the
Mhm.
same kind of concepts because they got squadoosh in the wide receiver category with all due respect to Richie
And how
James
many
and
yards
Darius
rushing did they
Slayton.
have in this game?
They had in this game many yards rushing.
Did they?
128. Saquon had 87, Jones had 35, Breida had 6.
How many was the average per carry for Saquon?
Saquon was 4.8 a carry.
Yeah. I also think that's something that it was cool to see from like a schematic standpoint is just how they were able to take advantage of Allen and Payne's aggressiveness, and Saquon ran really hard. He deserves a lot of credit, but schematically, I think they came out with a really good game plan and the guys executed it. And one of the things I think when you go on those long drives, like our guys were getting tired and they weren't used to playing that many plays consecutively. So they deserve a ton of credit, man. The Giants, they did a great job offensively. They did a great job defensively. And, I don't want to say we were out coached because I think Scott came out and did some good stuff in the second half and Jack did some good stuff, but they deserve a ton of credit.
Definitely. All right. Anything else from this game that you wanted to mention in terms of looking back at the tape?
No, I don't think so. I think that's pretty much it.
All right. Well, in that case, that's the podcast. Hope you liked it. If so, subscribe. If you didn't, give us another chance. Subscribe anyway. Go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever else it is that you're listening right now. Subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, like and subscribe. We very much appreciate all of the interaction on YouTube. By the way, if you leave a comment, there's a pretty good chance you'll see it in a segment I do on the radio called Never Read the Comments. I don't listen to my own advice. We do that on Wednesdays, and then we post it up on my YouTube page, youtube.com/@CraigHoffman. So if you're watching on Odyssey Sports or 106.7 The Fans page, make sure that you are subscribed to my page as well, and you can check out more Commanders coverage there. That's it, and that's all for this edition of Take Command. We'll see you Friday for a Niners preview, and until then, have a great week. Thanks for checking out this clip of Take Command. Or maybe it wasn't a clip. Maybe it was the whole thing. You can always get the whole thing. Let's change the graphic. Ready? Boom. Producing on the fly. Bang. Wherever you get your podcasts. And, of course, right here on YouTube. You can also check us out not only at youtube.com/@CraigHoffman, but, Logan, the Odyssey Sports page is live soon. That's very exciting.
That'll be fun. I don't care where you subscribe as long as you do subscribe to one of these platforms. That would be very helpful for us.
Yeah, do it. Or Logan's going to come to your house and he's going to be a sift blocker and knock you over.
Cut the legs out from under you, right?